Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After running through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. We had a pretty good episode for you here today. A lot has happened. Obviously, training camp is kicking up. We have this opt-out situation. I was really hoping we would get through it unscathed and we would, go into the season 100%. But unfortunately, we did not, and that leads us to our first news story. This first news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins wide receiver Allen Hearns opts out of the 2020 season. Dolphins wide receiver Allen Hearns announced that he will opt out of the 2020 season. Hearns is the first Dolphins player to make the call, but he's far from the first NFL player to do so. Hearns joined the Dolphins last summer and quickly earned an extension in November. The Dolphins inked him to a 2-year, $8 million deal, $3 million of which is guaranteed. Hearns was set to build off of his 32 grabs for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but that will have to wait till next year. Obviously, we still have a lot of depth on this team when you talk about Preston Williams, Isaiah Ford, Jakeem Grant, Gary Jennings, Matt Collins, Devontae Parker, Albert Wilson. There's still a lot of talent on this team, so it's not the biggest loss in the world in terms of, now we're without a starter that we can't replace. We can replace him with some of these other players because they are talented, but we were searching for that slot receiver. I really liked what Allen Hearns did in spurts last year. Obviously, it wasn't consistent. He had some drops. He had some costly fumbles last year that cost us some points. So his play was kind of up and down. But I was really looking forward to him in this offense, in this Gailey offense. He's a former Pro Bowler, top 100 member. Just a good route runner. He's just a good possession receiver, and I was looking forward to see what he could do. And he has some size. He's got some, physical run after the catch ability. He's a very talented player. It's unfortunate that, he was coming off the broken leg last year. Like I said, his play was up and down. But I was looking forward to see him compete, see if he could take that slot role. It would have been interesting to see where he would have ended up in 2020. I was excited about Allen Hearns, and it sucks that he's gone now. And he could have been a good, especially if Tua's playing, he's a good veteran possession receiver. He's a good security blanket. I think he would have been better than a year ago. And he's a good mix with some of the guys that we already have on the roster. He does things differently. Despite not having shaky hands last year, in the past, he's had, again, just a good, solid possession receiver. Again, former Pro Bowler. It just sucks that we didn't get to see, him continue to get better and, get healthier. And maybe we would have gotten that Jacksonville Jaguars, Allen Hearns, and we could have done a lot of damage with that receiver core. So it does suck, but in saying that, Gary Jennings I would look out for big time. I think he's going to, and if we had preseason, I think he would have been one of the more standout guys. His offseason has been very good from what we've heard from around the league and, from the Dolphins organization. They're really high on him. He's a really athletic guy. I'm excited to see where he goes. Maybe that opens up some avenues for him, gives him a little bit more room, and maybe he'll make the team. I think he was going to make the team anyway as a special teams guy. Maybe a returner or something like that, maybe on kickoffs, something like that, because he is a really good athlete. So maybe this opens up for him, but he does do things differently. He's more of a speed guy. It'll be interesting to see if he does play the slot, if he is targeted to play that position in camp, to see where that slot position really works out. Because I do, and we'll get into Preston Williams later because we have a story on him, but I expect, at least for the majority of the season, even though Preston's coming off of an injury, I expect those two to start on the outside, and whoever's inside is where it becomes more interesting. So with Allen Hearns out, maybe you get Gary Jennings in there, who I am excited to see play. I don't know if you guys are, but I am excited to see play. From all we've heard, to see him play, from all we've heard in the offseason. So, again, maybe there's a little bit of a silver lining to this, even though I was excited to see him play. It would have been an amazing preseason to see all these guys go at it, especially the quarterbacks and the receivers. It would have been really fun and to break that down. And it sucks we don't really get to see that. I know that we're going to have somewhat of an open training camp, so we get to see, maybe some of the beat writers can elaborate on some of the things that's happening, some of the competitions and stuff, but it would have been nice to see that in action. It would have been really nice, but it is unfortunate. We'll see what happens with the slot position, but again, excited to see Gary Jennings. This next news story comes from Bleacher Report. The Dolphins have waived cornerback Cordrea Tankersley. What a career. I mean, Tankersley was the 97th overall pick. He was a third-round pick in 2017. He started 11 games as a rookie, and he totaled 24 tackles and 7 pass defense, but had injuries, really broke his career. Had a promising career. Really fits this system. He never really fit the system that we ran before in the previous regime, where it was a lot of zone, heavy blitz scheme. So it's interesting to see. I mean, it would have been interesting to see him in this scheme where there's a lot of press man, bump and run stuff, which he did a lot in Clemson. I think that would have maybe fit his game more, and he did have a promising start to his career. He had an up and down season when he was a rookie, but he had some, especially early on, he had some really high points, and he held his own for a rookie corner. I think his career was on the up and up, and it just kind of unfortunately got derailed by injuries and inconsistencies and stuff of that nature. And plus, we added a bunch of depth at that position over the years, and I think he just kind of got thrown to the wayside a little bit. But he was a good player. He was a good physical corner, like he was in college. It's unfortunate that his career got derailed like it did. Because I think he could have been something if he could have just stayed, if it could have all worked out. Similar to, another good corner from that era in that little pocket there was Tony Lippett. Had a great 2016. He gets injured. You never really hear from him again. He went to the Giants. He kind of smoked out. And same thing with Cordrea. I mean, they had promising careers as young corners, had their moments, and kind of just... I know, it's weird. That regime was with Adam Gase and, all the promising players from that, small era in Dolphins football. When you talk about Jay Ajayi, Tony Lippett, Cordrea, who had a little... I mean, not to the extent of those guys. Jarvis Landry. So many players that looked like they were going to become... Laramie Tunsil. I mean, like, that nucleus was there, and it's just weird from... Even looking back on some of the old videos that I did... Some of the old opinions I had, it's just a completely different organization than it was then. And it's crazy that all of those young players turned out the way they did. So it's just weird looking back on some of those young players and where they ended up. It's crazy. Because a lot of those guys had a lot of talent, a lot of young talent on that team, and it's just crazy to see where all of them ended up. Alright, so moving on from that, let's go to the Finsider, where our next news story comes from. Preston Williams cleared to practice. This is great news for Dolphins fans. Last week, Brian Flores announced Tua Tagovailoa was cleared to practice. Okay, so we'll merge these two. Tua was cleared to practice after suffering a hip injury last year. He's obviously ready to go. He's been out there running around. I don't know if you're on the Dolphins Twitter or not, but you can see some of that, which is really exciting. Even though it's just players running laps like they're in high school, it's cool to see. Preston Williams is the latest Dolphins to be the latest Dolphin to be cleared. After rehabbing from an ACL he suffered in November last season, Williams was off to a promising start after signing as an undrafted free agent, and hopefully he will build off of his success in year 2. So yeah, this is great news. Preston's already back. It really surprised. I mean, I guess it has been a long time, if you think about it. But it's good news that he's already back. And again, just to reiterate that, Preston Williams is the latest Dolphin to be cleared to practice, as the wide receiver has been rehabbing from an ACL injury. So he's cleared and ready to go. When I heard that from the press conference, I was like, whoa, that's pretty dope. That we're going to get him this early on in the offseason, even though it's, a shortened offseason, very shortened offseason. At least he's going to start now. I think that's a good thing. Obviously, it's a good thing. Hopefully he's close to 100% week. At least we're going to get to see him play in week 1. I think that's the best news about this. At least we're going to see Preston, and I cannot wait. Again, this is why preseason would have been amazing. Whether he would have played preseason or not, who knows, but just to see Tua throw to Preston Williams would have been awesome. And especially, I just want to see where Preston is in year 2. He looked like an absolute monster. He reminds me a lot of AJ Green. I don't think he's as athletic as AJ Green is. but his game is very similar to AJ Green's. He reminds me of a lot of different receivers, and I'm very excited to see him continue. I mean, his game is awesome. I think the only thing that negative I would say about his first year was he was a little inconsistent in terms of his hands, and I think a lot of that was just confidence and him being thrown into the fire with this crazy team. And I think in year 2, that shouldn't be a problem. He didn't have that problem in college. I don't think he'll have that problem in the pros. And he made some insane catches throughout the preseason and the regular season. I'm very excited to see Preston. And again, very upset, that we didn't. I mean, we would have been getting a preseason game pretty soon here. And it sucks that we, again, I know I've said this 1,000 times already, but it would have been amazing to see that in preseason because we have such good quarterback depth that, I mean, literally, there would have never been a year in the last 10 years more exciting to watch a preseason game than this year would have been. With Tua, Fitzpatrick, Rosen, some of the receivers, to see some of these rookies, it would have been pretty awesome. So yeah, just great news that Preston is on his way to the field. Is great. This next news story comes from Bama Online. And it's just some quotes when Ryan Fitzpatrick was talking about Tua. And this is what Ryan had to say about Tua when he was asked in his press conference. He said, quote, "I don't know how much time it will be before Tua will be in the lineup. I know that I'm a placeholder. We've already had that conversation. I've told him I'm going to do the best I can to lead this team and win football games when I'm out there. Whenever it is that Tua gets his chance, whenever it's early or late or whenever, I'm going to be his biggest cheerleader." That was one of the most least interesting quotes in this, but I thought I would bring it up anyway. It is whatever. It's like coach speak. Who cares? Fitz wants to play. He's like, yeah, whenever Tua plays, he plays. He's not going to have a problem with that. There's not really much there to that quote. But there is an interesting quote here about Tua's personality and how he's what he's thought of him so far. He said, quote, "He's a really interesting guy. He's got a lot of energy to him. And you can even tell the guys are going to gravitate to him. There's just something about him. He's very likable, and I can already tell that he's going to be one of those guys that gets along with everybody. The guys are going to want to follow him. He just has that kind of aura around him." So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And he goes on to say, quote, "Part of it is probably the way he played at Alabama and just kind of the name and reputation that he's built for himself. But there's not a whole lot of ego involved, and he's very likable. The general conversations, whether about football or life, it's been really fun so far." So I really that's the most interesting quote. It's like how, the people gravitate towards him. He's a really nice guy, not a lot of ego for a high, it's crazy that Tua doesn't, you can see why he doesn't have an ego if you've seen where, his family and how he's grown up. You can see how he is the way he is. But from everything we've heard, I think why that quote's important, from everything we've heard from the Dolphins organization and people around it and reporters and stuff of that nature, it's been glowing so far about Tua. The locker room already loves him. We heard that from Jesse Davis as well in his little press conference that he did. He's had nothing but good things to say about him. Obviously, Fitz saying, the guys, you can already see how he can be a great leader. He likes him. So yeah, it's pretty good news. It's way better to compare if you don't remember. But when Tannehill was drafted in 2012, I think he started as the third-string quarterback behind Garrard and I believe Matt Moore at the time, and he did not have, his preseason was actually not that bad if people remember. And his actually first two games, his first game in the league was not very good, but that team was better than ours. And the second game, he actually had a great game against the Raiders. But if you compare the off seasons, at least so far, I know they're different. None of that was being said about Tannehill. It was very different. So this is not normal. I think this is a positive. People might think, everybody says this about their quarterback, but no, they didn't. If you remember Tannehill's offseason, he eventually got to the start because he was the better quarterback, but it wasn't a very, he had Garrard, who was, out of his prime, and Matt Moore, who is good, but he's not a top 15 quarterback or anything like that. He's not some insurmountable mountain that they have to climb. So it was very different. So comparing the two in terms of how they started, I think Tua is off to a much better start. Nobody was talking about Tannehill, and really never ever did talk about Tannehill's leadership in his time in Miami ever. And it's nice to hear that from Tua. And I think that's one of the things that everybody loves about Tua, and one of the reasons why he was so highly coveted was his leadership. And it's just nice to hear that things are going in the right direction. We haven't heard that about a quarterback, and especially, I can't remember. I mean, maybe Chad Pennington, but he was a veteran at the point. But a rookie quarterback, I think this is just a really good sign. And I just really wish preseason. I need to see some Dolphins football is my point. I cannot wait for the season to start. I'm super excited about it. The whole opt-out situation, hopefully it ends there with Alan Hearns. I know Byron Jones has been very outspoken about some of the things related to the virus and, how the NFL and stuff like that. But hopefully he doesn't opt out. And I'm just, hopefully we can make it to the season with most of our key guys, or our key contributors. Because it's looking like it. I think if anybody was going to opt out, it would have already happened. Especially with some of our high-profile guys. I don't know why I just blanked out right there. I think that's it for the news. I did want to bring up something that is news-related before we left this. I wanted to bring up something, some of the things that I heard from two things that if you guys watch the Omar Kelly and I believe it's Dave Hyde. I don't know why it's Dave Hyde. I always forget his name. I get him and Barry Jackson mixed up for some whatever reason. But usually, most of it's. I love that show a lot, and you get some good nuggets in there that you don't really hear about, whether it's news or whatever. Sometimes they say some things like, "Oh, that's interesting," that no one else really knew. I thought one of the interesting things that Omar brought up in that video was, and I think this is news related. How Rosen has been with the team since really the beginning. Obviously, Fitz lives, I think, in Arizona, and he's been here with some of the Dolphins team members. Obviously, really having somewhat of an offseason, or as much as he could have had an offseason. So he's been with the team longer than Tua and Fitz. He's already been kind of with the team, obviously practicing, throwing a little bit. I thought that was really interesting. So Rosen kind of got a little bit of a head start on the other three. And the other thing that he brought up that I thought was interesting was Fitz's arm. And I know this has been a topic of conversation before, and some of us know this, but it's interesting how in Fitz's press conference that he was talking about not having preseason, not having OTAs and some of the other offseason programs has really helped out his arm. And Omar was talking about how, as the season was going on, he was losing a lot of arm strength. And Fitzpatrick said that in his press conference that, he has had issues with that and keeping a fresh arm. So I think this is good for Fitz, and especially since he's a veteran quarterback, it's going to be interesting to see, how much that does help him out. And I thought those were the two things that were really interesting that came from that video, or that show. Obviously, those two were beat writers, and I thought the two little nuggets there that were interesting. I think that's it. I think we did, 18, almost 20 minutes of news. Let's get into the fan Q&A, ladies and gentlemen, where we answer fans' questions. Let's see here. This first question comes from your mama. He says, "Hey, Skaggs." He says, "Number 1, did you ever play football yourself, and what position did you play? Number 2, if today was week 1... what would your lineups look like in offense and defense if you were B-Flow? Love your show. Greetings from Austria." That's pretty awesome, dude. If you're actually, this dude's all the way from Austria. Okay, so your question is, thank you, by the way. That means a lot. Did you ever play football yourself? And what position? No, I never played, organized football, no. Never did it. Grew up loving the game. But I never played. I mean, obviously I played with friends and stuff like that, but never organized football. And question 2, he says, if today was week 1, what would your lineups look like on offense and defense if you're B-Flow? Uh, okay, so if offensively, I would, and I know some things that Omar also said this in the video. He was talking about how Matt Breida has really been deemed the starter so far in offseason. I think I would switch that if I was Brian Flores for my Week 1 offense. I think I would have Howard starting and Matt Breida be sort of the change of pace back, third down guy. My offensive line would be Austin Jackson. Oh, you know what? I forgot a news story. That reminds me. Eric Flowers has been placed on the COVID-19 list. I forgot about that. We could talk about more about that, but which is kind of a big hit. I think some players have been taken off the list. Now you get put on this list if you have been near someone with the virus or you have tested positive for the virus. So it doesn't necessarily mean he has it. So it's gonna be interesting to see what that timetable is because we really need him. He's obviously a big deal. I forgot to even mention that. I apologize. But yeah, Eric Flowers has been put on the COVID list. And I know Matthew Stafford was just recently removed from it because his positive test was actually a fluke. It wasn't something faulty happened there. So the timetable's weird for that because we don't know if he actually tested positive for it or he's just been in contact with someone that's had it. I don't understand. I know that I think it's 2 weeks before you get over the virus. If I do, I might be totally wrong about that. I don't know how long quarantine is in the NFL. It's going to be interesting to see how fast he gets back, and hopefully he can play Week 1, and hopefully he's healthy. But back to this question, what would my starting offensive defense be Week 1 if I was B-Flow? So I would start Howard. Again, I would have Matt Breida as a change of pace guy. I would have Austin Jackson, Eric Flowers, Ted Karras, Robert Hunt. Hopefully I remember his name right. And Jesse Davis at right tackle. That would be my starting offensive line. My receivers would be Devontae Parker, Preston Williams. In the slot, I would have Albert Wilson as of right now. And tight ends, obviously, you got Shaheen and Gesicki. So that would be my offense. Defensively, I would have Shaq Lawson. This is an interesting question. I think Ogba. The defensive line's weird. We'll just throw Ogba in there. My two starting defensive tackles are because the front is weird because we're a very multiple front. It could be really anybody, but I'll just do a traditional defensive line. Okay, so this is just like a 4-3 traditional defensive line. I would go Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogba, Godshaw, and Wilkins. I would probably have Raekwon come off the bench. And some of the other defensive tackles. And then safeties-wise, I would have Igbenogany at free safety, strong safety, Eric Rowe. Corners would be Byron Jones, Xavier Howard, and slot corner would be Bobby McCain. Linebackers, Van Noy, Baker. Edge guys, I guess Beagle and Weaver would be my edge guys. And obviously Van Noy can switch in and out on that. And that pretty much covers, I guess, the defense in case I'm missing anybody. Yeah, but that would be the lineups that I would go in to Week 1 with. Just as of right now. Obviously, we don't know a lot. And thank you for saying you love the show. It means a lot. This next question comes from Logan. He says, do you think not having a preseason will hurt undrafted players from making the team? Do I think it'll hurt undrafted players from making the team? And he brings up Kirk, the receiver, obviously the undrafted receiver. He says, and if he does, do you see him as a boundary receiver or slot? I don't know enough about him to really dive into it, so I don't know enough about Kirk here, but I doubt he's going to make the team. There's just too many... I don't know. I guess with the Allen Hearns situation, he could make the team, I guess, but I don't see him making the team. So, but does it hurt the undrafted players? Kyle Shanahan brought this up and said that preseason is more vital than people think, because, and I think people have heard coaches say this a lot, but they say that a lot of players are good practice players, but when it comes to game action, they're significantly worse. And in preseason, you can really pick the guys that are actually good players who practice well and are good in games, and it just kind of weeds out the weakness of the team, I guess you could say. So not having that, it's going to be significantly harder to pick out the bad apples from the good apples. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bad thing for undrafted players, but it's going to be harder to pick who's good and who's not. That's for sure. This next question comes from Alpha. He says, "Why does the media always underrate us and never give us a chance? They have us winning 5.5 games this year, and 2 more years before we make the play." Yeah, the whole 2 more years before we make the playoffs is one of the dumbest statements. I don't even understand. Do they not watch the league and just see some of the turnaround? And not everybody's made equal and all this, but it's very rare that any NFL team, especially in today's game, gets a 4-year build and they don't get fired. Like, it's very rare, and it never really works. If it takes you 4 years to get somewhat competitive, it's a problem. I think, how long is Kyle Shanahan? I think that's probably the most recent one. But if you think about, like, the Jeff Fisher experiment, like, that was terrible. Most of these guys, like, get the team turned around relatively quickly. It shouldn't take 4 years for you to make the playoffs. If it takes you 4 years to get, like, say, the 7th seed, then there's something wrong. I think Sean McDermott made the playoffs the second year, but they were, like, they might have been 9-7 at the time. But that's what I'm talking about. If it takes you that long to get to, like, let's say 9-7, they added an extra seed to the playoffs. By the way, the playoffs, the statement is 2 years before you make the playoffs is dumb. If it takes you 4 years to get to 7th seed, then there's obviously something wrong. So no, I don't believe that. It should be at least next year we should be in playoff contention, or if not make the playoffs, or there's something wrong. Now I think this year. And I've said this before, I think we're going to be competitive. So, more competitive. And even Omar said it in his show, who's usually very negative. He said he sees the team going 9-7. So, I think this team is better than a lot of people give it credit for, that's for sure. And I don't think it's going to take 2 more years after this to be a playoff team. I think that's insane. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skaggs, the last time I remember the Dolphins were at least a playoff team was when Ricky Williams was there. Who do you think was responsible for the Dolphins imploding in 2004? Ricky Williams suspended for pot, and then obviously Wentz. What's his name? Wanstead quitting after a 1-8 start in the season. I think that team was going downhill anyway. I don't really think that team had. I mean, if you think about it, it was 2004. So the previous year we didn't even make the playoffs. Yeah, it was 2004. So we made the playoffs in 2002, and we beat the Peyton Manning Colts with Lamar Smith and that whole team. Yeah, I think that team was going downhill. I think the previous year, though, we went 10-6 and missed the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. But I do believe, that team was going down. That team never, especially with the quarterbacks and all that other stuff, that team never had a shot. It just never had a shot. There just wasn't enough. We just didn't have good quarterbacks. Okay, I forgot his name. His name is Dave Wanstad. I had to Google it. Anyway, didn't want to sound like a complete moron. But the question is, what is really the question here? Dave Wanstad, not Dave Wanstad, or whatever the guy said. Let's see here. Where did we leave off here? Wanstad quitting after a 1-8 start in the season. He says, "Hey guys, last time I remember the Dolphins were a playoff team was Ricky Williams was there, and Wanstad was coach. Who do you think was responsible for the Dolphins imploding in 2004? The Dolphins were responsible for that. That team was going downhill. Obviously the whole Ricky Williams situation. He was, first of all, the dude was being ran into the ground. Literally ran into the ground. He was our only offensive weapon that was above average. And we were killing his career, basically, because we didn't. He said it himself. He would have played longer, and he probably would have been a Dolphin longer if we had a quarterback, and those teams would have been significantly better. So I think had to do with us not being able to replace Marino. The Patriots were coming up, and everything was just kind of going downhill. That team had no future. If they found a quarterback, it would have been, but I just don't see a scenario. It's easy to go back and say, well, they should have done this in this draft, or they should have done this in this situation. But you can say that for every organization. That team was just doomed. All right, let's move on from that question. This next question comes from Julian. He says, hey, Skaggs, thank you for these videos. Do you think it's a good idea for the Dolphins to keep our quarterbacks, as Fitzpatrick is probably going to retire next year? Thank you for saying, thank you for these videos. He says, do you think it's a good idea to keep all the quarterbacks, as Fitzpatrick is probably going to retire this year or next year? Yes, I do think it's a good idea. I mean, obviously, this team should carry 3 quarterbacks. Fitz, Tua, and Rosen for a variety of different reasons. Rosen still could become something. Tua, I would like to see where the offensive line is at, where the offense is at. And Fitz, I think, is just the most ready to play right now, especially with Gabley's offense and stuff, and the shortened off season. It doesn't make sense to not keep all 3. To answer your question, Julian. And obviously, thank you for these videos. This next question comes from Listen Without Warning. He says, could Fitzpatrick stick around after retirement, maybe even coach for the Fins? I think he's more of a media member than he is a coach. His personality, people love him. I could see him being on ESPN. He'd be a great Monday Night Football guy, that's for sure. This next question comes from SM. He says, do you read anything into Fitzpatrick mentioning Tua in his recent interview and not Rosen? No, SM, I do not read into that because I don't think he was asked about Rosen. I think he's not just going to say, yeah, Josh is a great guy. It would be even weirder if he did that. If he wasn't asked about Rosen, it just brings up Rosen. I don't think it's anything to look into or to read into too much. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I mean, I'm mispronouncing Wanstead or whatever the heck his name was. And now I can't. I mean, we're just losing every brain and anything I had up there is gone now. Anyway, this next question comes from TR3MC. He says, do you think the preseason being taken helps the Dolphins or hurts them, especially the rookies? I think the OTAs and rookie camps hurt them more than the preseason being gone. I think that's what hurts them the most, in my opinion. But like I said before, I think it's hard. I think what it hurts the most is roster decision making. I think that's what it hurts the most. This next question comes from John Malone. He says, Fitz starts the season. Tua sits and Josh Rosen can be coached if his ego is not still there. Your thoughts? Fins up. So to answer your question, John, I think Fitz will start. Tua will sit. And I don't think Josh has a big ego. If that's what you were saying. He says Josh Rosen can be coached if his ego is not still there. I don't think that's the reason Josh has struggled, in my opinion. I just think it's just bad rosters, really, and just bad luck, to be honest with you. He's talented. Obviously, he has his issues, that's for sure. Because clear Fitz was a better quarterback, and is probably still a better quarterback. We'll have to see than Rosen. We saw that firsthand, but I think Rosen, we forget, is a very talented player. I still do believe that. He's young. This is his 3rd year in the league. He's had unfortunate, not only with bad rosters, but he's been punted from different teams. So I think we still have a lot to look forward with Josh, to answer your question, John. And I don't think ego is a huge deal. This next question comes from SM. He says, with Rudock out of here, what are the chances Rosen ends up on the practice squad? 0. I think they're going to carry him on the roster. This next question comes from Beef. He says, hey, Skaggs, do you think Devontae Parker was snubbed from a spot in the NFL's top 100 players of 2020? Also, do you think anybody on that list was overrated or underrated? I mean, I don't know about the overrated or underrated. I think Kirk Cousins is overrated. If that's the first thing that came to my mind. I think it's like, do we have to put him on this list? But and same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think all of those guys were really high, but what was the question? Oh, I definitely think Devontae Parker was 5th in receiving, and Cortland Sutton made the NFL's top 100. Cortland Sutton is not a better receiver than Devontae Parker, nor did he accomplish. By the way, if they're like, I guess winning, if you want to bring that argument up, first of all, these are receivers we're talking about, number one. Number two, both teams were bad last year. So, don't really know where that comes from. But Devontae had better numbers. He was 5th in receiving, led the AFC in receiving, and he didn't make the top 100. It was weird. I know the ballots come out in November, so maybe that had something to do with it. But yes, Devontae Parker had over 100 yards receiving on the Defensive Player of the Year in a Bill Belichick system. So yes, he should have made the top 100. Sorry, clicked the wrong thing. So yeah, it does kind of make me upset that he wasn't in the top 100. All right, this next question comes from Mark. He says, "Why do you think it's a rush to get Tua on the field?" I think for obvious reasons. He's Tua. He's the 5th pick. I don't think the coaches want him or rushing him onto the field or anything like that. But I do think there is definitely a sense of, around the building and stuff that they want to see him play, and I think we all do. This next question comes from Alpha, or this last question comes from Alpha. He says, "Where will Rosen be in 2 years?" That's a great question. I don't know. I couldn't answer that question. It really could be anywhere. Who knows? I'm really excited to see where these quarterbacks end up. It's going to be really fun. It's very similar to the Packers in the 90s, where they had a ton of really, they had Burnell, Hasselbeck. They had a lot of really talented quarterbacks behind their franchise quarterbacks. So it's going to be interesting to see if we follow some of those molds and keep them for a longer period of time. This is the first time, a talented quarterback has been behind another talented quarterback. Obviously, Montana and Young is a famous one. Rodgers and Favre is another one. There's been a lot of them. So, Kaepernick and Smith. So, I think, eventually all of those guys became the starter. If it wasn't in the same building or a different building, they all became a starter at one point in their career. So, I think one of those two things is going to happen, obviously. I don't know which one of those is going to happen. We'll have to see. And we'll have to see where Rosen is in his career. And, he's still a talented QB. Maybe he has taken the next step in year 3. And who knows, maybe Josh Rosen is the one who starts in 2020. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. That has been the Miami Dolphins podcast. We had a lot to talk about. I think, the episodes haven't been that long. We haven't had a ton of things to talk about. But I did obviously enjoyed making this video. And very excited for the season. Very, very excited for the season. I'm excited for the defense especially. I think the defense has underrated depth. And there's a lot of young talent on it, and I'm very excited to see it. And I'm very excited not only because of that, but Brian Flores has the tools and the toys to play with. And obviously, we can't forget he's a defensive-minded guy. I'm excited to see some of that aggressiveness come back, because now that we have the talent to do it, I'm excited to get after the opposing quarterbacks or some of the blitzes that he's known for. I'm very excited to see this season is just exciting. It's very exciting with the young quarterbacks, the defense, some of the new additions to the O-line. Oh, and by the way, one thing I want to mention before I leave, Fitzpatrick also brought up the offensive line and how big they are. He was like, you can really tell it's just a different feel in that offensive line room. I thought that was one of the more interesting things that he said in his press conference. He's like, the offensive line looks big, and you can tell that we've made strides in that department, which I think was good. I was like, that's cool to hear. So that gets me excited about the offensive line. Excited about the running backs too. Howard and Breida, that's gonna be really fun to watch. And just Gesicki's, and with him getting better, just Preston Williams. All of it's very exciting. So that's it, guys. I am Skags1383. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this.